This is Jerry Mason, the Kickin Lawyer, and I hope you'll join me every Tuesday at 5 p.m. on the Kickin Lawyer fan page on Facebook as we do a Law Talk Live, where we discuss business, politics, and the law. If you missed the live version of the Law Talk, you can watch the recorded episodes on our YouTube channel. Just search Jerry Mason, Jeremason. This is Jerry Mason, the Kickin Lawyer, for another Law Talk. I'm excited today. We have what I think is my most famous and successful guest. Not knocking any of the other guests, but I'm real excited to have him with us. I do want to remind everybody, if you haven't, to please like, share, comment on all our stuff. You can find us on all platforms at Kickin Lawyer, and this is going to be available for playback on all podcast platforms. I also want to thank our sponsor, Badger's Laser Solutions. We got these new 4K cameras and fancy mics and everything, so you can see us real crystal clear and see how beautiful we are. We will be at the Somerville Cotton Festival on September 11th with a booth there at our new office. And then on September 18th, I'll be at Jerry Lawler's wrestling reunion at the Fitz in Tunica, and we'll get to talking about that in a minute. So we are a little early, and I get that, but I didn't want to waste Mr. Lawler's time. So since he got here and was very timely, we decided to go ahead and start. So hopefully as you guys jump on around 5, as I mentioned over the last couple of weeks, feel free to ask questions. Josh is going to be over kind of moderating the questions, and then me and the King will just be talking. But anyway, the WWE Hall of Fame member, multi-time champion of the world wrestling, I'm a personal fan, and to me, you're a legend. Jerry the King Lawler's with me, so welcome to our show.
Well, thank you, Jerry. My pleasure. Nice to be here. Great to be in Covington, Tennessee. Covington is one of my favorite places to pass through. I mean, I must have passed through it 1,000, maybe more than 1,000 times throughout my career, but never had too much of an opportunity to stop. But I have a few times, but I love the little downtown area, the little square here, and all the little shops and the boutiques and that sort of stuff. I'm a big fan. And I used to stop when there was the kind of the corner drugstore up here, where
Roper's Drugs.
Yeah, it was the last. I think it may have been the last remaining like little soda fountain anywhere in Tennessee. Except there is still a soda fountain. I keep forgetting this. Right next to my club on Beale Street, at the A. Schwab's. They actually still have a working soda fountain in there. You can go in and get yourself a ice cream soda, chocolate soda, something like that. So, but I used to love the one here.
You'll like this. So I was going to ask you too. Again, we sort of discussed a couple weeks ago about how you're big into Superman, and obviously I am. But part of the reason I am, my father was big into Superman, and you and he are. I won't say you're close in age, but he's older than me anyway. So he was a big Superman fan, and he bought comic books at Roper Drugs.
Oh yeah.
And they had the little the old school spinny thing for the comic books. Well, as a child after school, I would get to go by there, and my mama would give me $2 for lunch, and I think lunch was like 90 cents or $1.10 or something, and it was enough for me to go buy a comic book every day. Yeah. So I started buying Superman comic books.
Well, here's how you can tell me that. Pretty much said about the date. Do you remember how much the comic books cost?
Yes, that's a good point. So the cover, when I was a kid, the cheapest price I recall buying specifically Superman, but most comic books was around 75 cents.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, I know, way more
you
than
are a kid.
Yeah, well,
I go back to the days when they were 10 cents.
Yes, sir.
And then it was like it was horrifying. I thought the world was going to end when they jumped up to 12 cents.
My dad said the same thing.
12
he said that 2
cents for a comic book.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, then they've just, I don't know, by the time they got to 75 cents a piece, it was like out of my price range.
Yes, sir.
I stopped. I mean, I would be guilty of going into Roper's and standing there and look at the comic book and then sticking it back in the rack. Yeah.
Well, again, for me now, now they're like $3, $4, $5 a piece,
Insane.
depending on the ones.
Crazy.
So, and they don't have the production that they had. A lot of the kids aren't into them like they used to be, which I think is sad. But yeah, so going into that. By the way, I really appreciate this. I'm gonna show everybody because I'm proud of it. Jerry Lawler is an awesome artist, and a lot of people may not know that, but he drew this. This is a print that he did of the Supermans, the
Mount Rushmore of Superman.
Mount Rushmore of Superman, and it's got my personal favorite Superman, Mr. Christopher Reeves, on there.
And my personal favorite, same last name, but George Reeves.
So speaking of
old
that,
original
because
Superman.
I knew you were coming, when we had the Covington Comic-Con, I got this for you.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if you have this print, but it's Peter Milanis, who's a Memphis artist.
Yes.
And I knew he was your favorite, so I got that for you.
That is so cool.
And so why?
That's the only Superman that I really ever.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask. So is it, you think it's a generational thing? That's who you grew up with?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And just like the same with Batman. I mean, I grew up with Adam West, and then of course all the Batman movies. I don't know, they just weren't Batman to me. I mean, I was always, Batman and Robin and the Batmobile. I actually own a Batmobile, the 1966
I'm
version
aware.
and everything.
How did you come by that?
I actually wound up buying. I did a Comic-Con in Knoxville, Tennessee, Fanboy Comic-Con, and Adam West was supposed to be sitting next to me at the Comic-Con. It was the only reason I agreed to do it. And they said, Adam West, and I'll put you. The promoter said, I'll put you next to Adam. And I said, oh my gosh, that's great, because I had done years ago. We had Adam West in the 70s on our Memphis wrestling show, and he and I did a little skit. I had a Super King outfit on, and he had his Batman outfit, and he and I had a little confrontation. And I was just excited. That would have been the first time I'd seen him since that time. So I get up there, and I get my table set up and everything, and here's Adam's booth and that sort of thing. And then right across from that, there was a guy. His name was Matt Dollar. And he had this custom Batmobile that he had built himself, and it was awesome. And it just, and this guy, he was cool. He had on a Batman outfit, the full regalia, and he looked as much like Adam West in that outfit as Adam West did. And so he looked like a young Adam West, right? So he was, people were coming by and having their picture made with he and the Batmobile, and then Adam West is going to be right across from it. And when as I'm setting up, about an hour before the show started on that Friday, the promoter comes by and he says, man, you're not going to believe this, Jerry. I said, what? He said, Adam West canceled on me. I said, you're got to be kidding me. He said, no, but don't despair. He said, I've got the $6 million man, Lee Majors, coming in to take his place. Well, cool. I said, I don't care about Lee Majors. I don't care about the $6 million man. I want Adam West sitting next to me, right? So anyway, he had a problem with his back or something, and he called and canceled at the last minute. And not funny, but I just spoke to him a few months ago at a Comic-Con. Lee Majors agreed to come in that day to take Adam West's place, and it was funny. The promoter, like I said, this is Knoxville, Tennessee. The promoter sends somebody, a friend of his, to the airport to pick Lee Majors up and bring him and his wife straight to the Comic-Con. And anyway, the Comic-Con starts, and this is like an hour gone by, and the promoter keeps coming by going, I don't know where he is. I don't get it. Anyway, he comes back by a few minutes later. He says, oh, you're not going to believe this. My idiot friend that I sent over to pick up Lee Majors, he said, I don't know if he ran the stop sign or somebody ran the stop sign. Anyway, he got T-boned.
Oh, man.
And Lee Majors is at the hospital right now.
Yeah.
And about maybe 2.5 hours later, in comes Lee Majors, the $6 million man now. He's got his left arm in a sling, right? And he's kind of all bruised and banged up, but he came straight from the hospital.
Man, that's dedication.
Yeah, that was dedication.
I guess that was not the mechanical arm then.
No, it must not have been. I think he used the mechanical arm to sign the autographs with.
Well, speaking of that, so I know that Oh, go ahead.
I got sidetracked from the
story.
Oh, yeah,
we didn't even find out about the
Batmobile.
car.
Yeah. Anyway, after the 3 days of doing the Comic-Con, and I'm sitting there looking at the Batmobile and watching people have their picture made with it, I became, got to know and talk to this Matt Dollar guy. And somewhere towards the end of the con, I went up to him and I said, Matt, would you ever consider selling the Batmobile? And he went, oh, man. He said, oh, nah. He said, I'll tell you what. He said, this is the first one. He said, I've actually built 3 of these things, and for other people. He said, but this was my first one, and I'm really partial to it. He said, but I don't want to sell it, but I'll build you one. And I said, how long would that take? He said, probably 8 or 9 months, maybe a year. Mm-hmm. I said, I'm an impulse buyer. I said I would buy that today, but I don't want to wait a year on something. So anyway, we parted ways, and about a month went by, and I got a call from a friend that lived up in near Knoxville that knew this Matt Donald guy, and he said, Jerry, were you serious about buying that Batmobile? And I said, yeah, I was serious then. And he said, well, I'll tell you this little story. He said, I know Matt Dollar. He said he's been taking care of his father. His father has Alzheimer's, and they've just found out that they're going to have to put him into a nursing home. And looking at how much that's going to cost, he said he's changed his mind and he would be willing to sell the Batmobile. So he gave me his number, and 2 days later, here comes a truck and pulling up with the Batmobile on the back of it down in Memphis, and I paid him a lot of money for it, but so I guess we were both happy. Yeah, that's how I got it.
Yeah, so I mean, I would obviously like a Batmobile too, but it's not Superman. So
no, it's not. You're right.
Were you? I know your focus has been, from your collection, it seems it's mostly Superman. But are you like DC focused or just whatever's in that genre you like?
At first, I was DC focused, and that started back from doing artwork like that. I think the first time I can remember, I was 5 years old, and that's when I can remember starting drawing Superman. And Batman, of course, it didn't come along until 1966, and this was in 55 when Superman came on TV, and then, of course, drawing the comics. And from that point on, and I don't even wear my WWE Hall of Fame ring. I don't know if anybody can see, but I wear a Superman ring just because I feel like that's what in the long run, if you go way back, that is what is responsible for all my success. That's how I got into wrestling, by drawing pictures of wrestlers. But I started out by drawing pictures of Superman when I was just a kid. And I, at that time, as I was growing up, that was in my mind. I wanted to grow up and be a comic book artist. I wanted to work for DC. I wanted to draw Superman. I wanted to draw Batman for the comics. And somewhere along the line, and when I got out of high school, this was like at the height of the Vietnam War, and I actually did get drafted, and I just knew I was going to go anyway. Went and got went to take my physical and had to go back 4 times, and had no idea, but I had. And I think it may have been the white coat syndrome or something. But anyway, I had high blood pressure at that time. I was 18 years old. And so I didn't get drafted, but I was thinking that I was going to be heading to Vietnam. But my art teacher through high school had saved a portfolio of my artwork, and she submitted it to the University of Memphis, which was Memphis State at the time. And all of a sudden, I get a letter. I won a full tuition commercial art scholarship to go to college at University of Memphis. So, this is like the first kid in my family to ever go to college or anything. So This was amazing. But it was so weird in the fact that once I started at the University of Memphis, I had a great art teacher throughout high school. Her name was Helen Stahl. She was an amazing artist. She'd done all sorts of Memphis prints and stuff that were selling, has been selling through the years. But and so I just really looked up to her work. I always admired her work. And then when I got to college, I had different professors and different art courses, and it was weird. It was like none of them were as good an artist as I was, and certainly not as good as my high school art teacher. And I just got real disenchanted in the fact that, like, how are they going to teach me anything about art when they're not as good as I am right now? So somewhere along the line, in like my first semester over there, my dad was a big wrestling fan, and he and I would drive up to the Ellis Auditorium on Monday nights and go to the live wrestling matches there in Memphis. And somehow, I don't know, I took a sketchbook with me, and I was drawing some pictures of the wrestlers while they were wrestling. And one of the fans that was sitting near us said, "Oh man, that's good artwork. You ought to send those into Channel 13 and see if they'll show them on TV." And I said, "Yeah, not a bad idea. I don't know what to come out of it, but I will." So the next week, I sent 4 or 5 drawings into the TV station, Didn't know anybody there or anything. I put Lance Russell and 485 South Highland, Memphis, Tennessee, and sent him in. And that Saturday morning, I turned the TV on like usual to watch the show. And all of a sudden, I see Lance Russell, Dave Brown sitting next to me. And on the desk, I could see my artwork is sitting there on the desk. And I went, oh my gosh, they're going to show my artwork. They're going to show my pictures on TV. And sure enough, like halfway through the show, Lance says to Dave, well, Dave, we had some great action down at the Ellis Auditorium last Monday night. Let's take a look. But, instead of just talking about it, we have some artwork here from a young fan named Jerry Lawler. And look, he kind of outlined what took place at the matches. Jackie Fargo defeated Tojo Yamamoto. Take a look at this shot. And I had a picture of like Tojo hitting Jackie Fargo and chopping him in half like cordwood or something. So, and I'm sitting at home, I'm sitting at home like they show, there's my artwork on television. It's like, whoa, I'm a star or something. And then when the show was over, I get a phone call from Lance Russell. And that unmistakable voice of Lance Russell, and he says, Jerry, everybody loved your artwork, and I was wondering if you could do some more and send it to us next week, and we'll use that to kind of show the people what happened last week at the matches. So that's how I got started doing that. And after about, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 weeks of me sending artwork in, he calls me up again and says, hey, I want you, if it's okay, I want you to come over this Saturday and actually be on the show. A lot of people would like to see, who's doing this artwork. And he said, plus, Jackie Fargo wants to meet you. Mm-hmm. He wants you to do some artwork for him. Now, younger people, Jackie Fargo in Memphis at that time.
He was like you, 70s, 80s Memphis.
Yeah, he was like John Cena or The Rock now, Yeah. So, he was the biggest star in Memphis wrestling. So, all of a sudden, Jackie Fargo wants me to do some artwork for him. And, to make a long story short, met Jackie Fargo, started doing artwork for him. We became friends. He started letting me travel with him to some of the little towns like Covington. Mm-hmm. I saw the lifestyle, and I thought, oh, my gosh, I would love to do something like this. And I started hounding him, and I said, Jackie, could you just let me try it one time? Just throw me in the ring on Saturday morning, let the real wrestlers beat the heck out of me or something like that. And so and he said, no, kid, you're too good an artist. Stick with that. You don't want to get tied up with wrestling. And some kind of way I finally told him, if I could just get one match for the Memphis promotion, I'll quit. I'll just one time, I won't bother you anymore, and I'll go back to being an artist. Of course, that was 51 years ago, and I'm still doing the wrestling. But I have come full circle and still do the artwork as well. But that's, to me, it all goes back to wanting to draw Superman and that kind of stuff from, in fact, when I was 5 years old.
When you were doing those wrestling sketches, you didn't have any concept at that time that it would lead to, like, you wrestling Jackie Fargo or anything like that.
No, not at all. I was just excited for my artwork to be on TV.
At that time, when you were going to become a wrestler, was there like an apprenticeship that they did with you? Did you learn? Now they've got schools and stuff you go to, but was that sort of how it was set up? You just sort of learned from taking your own bumps and stuff.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how guys got into it, and still to this day, almost everybody gets into the business a different way. I sort of lied my way in. I really did. I kept asking Jackie Fargo. He wouldn't, he kept saying, stick with art. And one day, and we actually had a little art studio that they had formed. He and Eddie Bond, a country music singer that was a partner of his, had formed like a thing called Bond Fargo Sign Company. Mm-hmm. And this was in like 1970 or 69. Yeah, 1970. And so this was before, if you had a painting company and you drove around in your pickup truck to your jobs, this is before the time where they had stick-on letters on the side of your car or on your truck. You had to go to a sign company, and somebody like me would sit there and hand letter the name of your company, and like your legal company here. I would be out there writing, Jerry and painting on the side of your truck. That's what they formed the company and had me doing. And so I'm just sitting in there one day between jobs, and all of a sudden this young wrestler, speaking of Jerry, this young wrestler, this young guy comes walking in the door. His name was Jerry Vickers. Never forget. He comes in and he says, "Hey, is Jackie Fargo around?" And I said, "No, he's not here yet." I said, "Can I help you?" And he said, "Well, I just, I'm a young wrestler and I just came down from St. Louis area and I wanted to talk to him about getting some work here in the Memphis area." Mm-hmm. And I looked at this guy, and he wasn't any much bigger than me, and I thought, this guy could be a wrestler. I don't know why I couldn't be.
Yeah.
So, and I told him, I said, "Well, you know what?" I said, I've been hounding Jackie myself to try to get a match or something under my belt, and this guy said, "Well," he immediately saw me. He saw a mark, which is what we sometimes call wrestling fans. He saw a mark in me sitting there. He says, "So you want to be a wrestler, but you've never wrestled before?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, first of all, you'd have to have some boots. Do you have any boots?" I said, "No." He said, "What about trunks or tights?" "No." He said, "Well, you know what? I might just happen to have an extra pair of boots and some tights I could sell you." Mm-hmm. And so just, really? So I've wound up buying a pair of trunks or tights and a pair of wrestling boots from this guy. And then he tells me, he said, "I'm actually wrestling. There's a little independent wrestling company over in West Memphis, Arkansas." And he said, the promoter's name is Aubrey Griffith, and he's
competing with Memphis wrestling.
Well, you might call it competing with Memphis wrestling, but nobody in Memphis even knew about this thing.
Yeah.
It was in an old abandoned theater, Avon Theater in West Memphis, which is sort of like the Ritz. It's across the street here. Mm-hmm. It had been just remodeled, or not remodeled, but what this guy had done, they didn't use it. It was like probably condemned or whatever, but he went in and rented it, took out about 20 rows of seats and put a ring down at the front where the people could look, sitting like you're watching a movie. Now you got in front of the screen, you got a ring. And I'll never forget, he had built his own ring light up above the ring, and it was like one of those big wash tubs, of galvanized steel wash tub with about 4 200-watt light bulbs sticking down out of it, right? But when I looked at it, I thought it was like Madison Square Garden. So anyway, Jerry Vickers said, "Yeah." He said they do some wrestling over on Saturday nights over in West Memphis. And I sort of got ahead of myself here because Jackie Fargo and Eddie Bond had also, I was like a stooge for them. I mean, I was having to go for jobs and everything. And Eddie was the program director at a radio station, little tiny radio station, KWAM, 990 on the dial. And they had given me an air shift. Actually, I worked like 7 to midnight on the radio because nobody else wanted that shift. Mm-hmm. So I'm sitting there playing country music every night on the radio.
It was a good commentator experience for the future.
It was very good commentator experience for the future. So anyway, this guy says, "Yeah, I'll take you over to," Jerry Vickers says, "I'll take you over and meet Aubrey Griffith. And, maybe," he said, "first of all, don't tell him that you've never wrestled." He said, "Just tell him if he asks you if you wrestled before, say, 'Yeah, down in Florida you wrestled some.'" So I said, "Okay." So sure enough, we drive over the next day. We drive over to West Memphis, and I'd never even been inside a wrestling ring. So we drive over there, and here's this little grizzled old veteran wrestler who had probably wrestled in Memphis years ago, and was retired now, and putting on these little shows that would draw maybe 100, 150 people. So shake hands with him. "Hey, Aubrey Griffith, how are you?" And Jerry Vickers says, "Yeah, this is Jerry Lawler, and he's a friend of mine, and he was looking to see if you got any openings for any matches. He'd like to come and work for you some, Aubrey." And he looked at me and said, "First question, hey, you ever wrestled before, kid?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Yeah, where'd you wrestle?" I said, "Oh, down in Florida." He said, "Really? Who'd you wrestle for down there?" And this is what my face looked like. Because Jerry didn't tell me who I had wrestled for.
He didn't know the territories even then.
Yeah, and I think he could tell by my facial expressions right then that I was lying, right? And he said, "Well, it doesn't matter." He said, I really don't have anything right now, but leave me your number, and if something comes up, I'll give you a call." So we're getting blown off, right? So all of a sudden, I pulled out my ace in the sleeve, or up my sleeve, and I said, "Well, I was just thinking that if I was wrestling over here for you, I could probably plug it on my radio show. I'm on the radio every night from 7 to midnight on KWAM radio. And he went, you could plug my matches on your radio station for free? I said, oh, yes, sir, no problem. And he said, all right, I'll tell you what, you and Jerry Vickers are going to be in the main event Saturday night against the Executioners. And I went, oh, my goodness. So anyway, that's how I had my first match. Never stepped foot in a ring before. And when the bell rang for our match, all I could think of was what I had seen. You know, my dad and I were big wrestling fans, and we went to the Memphis matches and see the real wrestlers, I called them at the time. I mean, throwing each other out of the ring and all this kind of stuff. And I'll never forget, there was this young Mexican wrestler named Young Anaya, and he was wrestling the Blue Infernos, and we were wrestling the Executioners, these guys with white mask and everything. And I had seen this move that just really impressed me, where. Oh, excuse me, I keep hitting this thing with my Superman ring. But anyway, this Blue Inferno guy grabbed young Anaya by the hair and by his tights, and he ran him all the way across the ring and threw him out between the top and middle rope. And I'll never forget it. I mean, he went sailing head first, had his hands tucked down between by his side. He didn't grab the ropes to break his fall or anything. He flew right out of the ring, and when he hit the floor, he kind of tumbled over and I just thought, oh my gosh, that looked so fantastic, right? So Jerry Vickers started the match with one of the guys, and so then finally he comes and he tags me, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what do? I get in the ring, and this guy grabs me, and I just said, throw me out of the ring. So I'm thinking, here I am, I'm going to do the Young Anaya move, right? So sure enough, he grabs me by the hair, tights, throws me. I put my hands down on my side, and I'm sailing through the air. And the next thing I remember, I'm in a chair like this. And Jerry Vickers has got a towel and he's fanning me, right? And I'm going, and I've kind of come to. And I said, what happened? And he said, well, what do you remember? And I said, I remember getting thrown out of the ring, and then I just heard a big bang. He said, yeah, that was your head hitting the concrete floor. And he said, our match lasted about 2 minutes because of that. He said, you were knocked out. We just now got you back to the back.
Dang.
But I loved it, and that was the start. And then, and so finally, after I went over there about 3 times, and Jackie Fargo and Eddie Bond had heard me. They never knew about the wrestling over there, but they heard me doing commercials for it.
I got you.
And that night, and then they came to me and said, look, you got to stop messing with that stuff. Jackie was like insulted. That was he thought it was competition to him, which it really wasn't. But he said, all right, kid, if I get you a match for Nick Goulas and the Memphis Wrestling, will you stop messing with that stuff over there? And I said, oh, yes, sir.
Yeah.
So sure enough, I mean, and to show you how dumb I was, I thought being on TV made you the big star. And so he said, all right, I'll get you a match next week. You'll be on TV against the interns, which was the real big mask guys, right? And so even though I got beat in about 30 seconds and just slaughtered and slammed and they did everything to me and then pinned me, I thought that was the greatest thing in the world. I said, man, I'm a TV star now, star wrestler.
Yeah, well, wasn't
beaten.
Far
but then
from the truth.
I went for I don't know, 6 months of just getting beat up every Saturday morning on TV. But I loved it.
Did the Jerry, you said Vickers, right? That guy.
Jerry Vickers.
With those tights, is that where you got the single leotard strap? Where'd that come from? Is that was as a kid, and again, I told you before, obviously I'm a fanboy here, but I mean, we would go to the Coliseum and watch you. I watched you every Saturday morning, huge fan, right? Loved, and the era that I remember the most, it was you, Bill Dundee. Y'all were either against each other or tag team together, and for whatever reason, that's the big memories I have is you and Bill
the
Dundee.
reason for that is I think we kind of looked it up one time, and Bill and I wrestled each other crazy. About 500 times.
Really? Oh, man. Y'all could probably do a match in your sleep then.
Yeah, exactly, right.
But what I was going to say is I remember the strap a lot. As a kid, it was like a superpower.
Yes.
When that strap came off, man, I'd get excited. So where did all that come from?
Well, it actually came from Jackie Fargo, who was my mentor, and like a father figure to me until he passed away. But Jackie had what we called. The funny thing was, there was only one place you could get wrestling gear made, and believe it or not, they still are in business today. It's called Carl and Hildegard. They are out of Ohio, and they still have the same little catalog with the same pictures that they had back in the 50s.
Huh.
I mean, Luthez and guys like that were buying their tights and boots and robes and stuff from Carl and Hildegard. So I got a hold of one of their catalogs, and I'm looking in there, and almost everybody just wore the trunks and maybe some of the long tights, but they had a couple of tops, and one of them was called a butcher top, and that's what Jackie Fargo wore, and it had two straps. Mm-hmm. And I remember Jackie would, when he would, just like I would do, when he would get beat down, and then all of a sudden when he was mad, he would stand up and he would pull both his straps down, and then he would make his comeback. Well, I'm looking through the thing, and I see this butcher top, and I said, I don't want to wear the same thing that Jackie wears. And then all of a sudden I see a little top. It says the Tarzan top is what it was called. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really remember anybody else really wearing one of those at the time. So I ordered a couple of Tarzan tops, and that's how that came about. The pulling it down part was just because I'd seen Jackie Fargo do that when, at the time for him to make his comeback. And so, but I just used the one strap, and it became like a trademark thing.
Yeah, I remember your strap and fire.
Oh, yeah.
I remember you.
Well, the first time I ever saw anybody throw fire, and where I learned it from, I think it was about like 1974. Jerry Jarrett came up with the idea they were going to try to push me into a world title position, where mm-hmm. the people would believe that I could beat somebody for the world title. So he lined up 10 different big-name wrestlers that were known all over the world. He lined these guys up in 10 weeks in a row for me to go through. And Lance Russell said, well, everybody wants to be the world champion, and what we've got coming up, ladies and gentlemen, we've got the top 10 contenders for the world title. And if Jerry Lawler wants to get to the top of the list and wants a title match, he's going to have to somehow go through these top 10 contenders. And it was like Bobo Brazil, Dick the Bruiser, Mr. Wrestling 2, The Sheik. Oh gosh, I don't know. And anyway, it was like 10 guys, and it was so crazy. None of these guys. I mean, I was a nobody. I was not even really heard of. I was just kind of getting the push in Memphis, and all of these guys were established superstars from known all over the world, really. And none of these guys would come in and get beat by somebody they'd never heard of. Mm-hmm. So what we did was we had matches, and we would come up with some kind of crazy ending of the match, like the Sheik. He was known. He was known. He would use a foreign object. He would get his opponent bleeding, and then at the end, when you had him going, somehow miraculously he would come up and throw a fireball at his opponent. And so when I wrestled the Sheik, I had him going, then he just stopped me for a second. He goes in his tights, and I see him start to throw the fire, and I move the referee in the way. Boom, he hits the referee with the fire, mm-hmm. and so the Sheik lost on disqualification. So, mm-hmm. That was the way I would get to advance I got to win over the Sheik, mm-hmm. even though he didn't really get pinned or anything like that. So, but yeah, seeing him do the fire, and then later on I asked him, after the matches, I asked him, how he did it, and he was kind enough to explain it to me. And so then every now and then I started using the fire, and for a long time it was just me and the original Sheik that would ever do that.
I never knew about the Sheik. I remember, like I said, but I'm from here and was biased.
Oh yeah, the Sheik he owned the promotion in Detroit, Michigan.
Okay.
And he was a big name in wrestling all over the country. And
Well, I have to tell you this too because so I did back in '03, 4, 5, and I think I told you before I've owned a martial arts school, been in martial arts my whole life, and I ran an MMA promotion, a mixed martial arts promotion called the High Octane Fighting Championship, and we started it here. And I got a wrestling guy that built me a cage. Originally, it was a ring. I had a ring, and you're talking about making the light. I had to fabricate lights, whole deal. And we did a full promotion, and we would go outside of this area too. It ended up doing 4 different states and was fairly successful. We did like 40 shows. The problem I was having in the beginning, though, is there was not many people, and I'm sorry about these mics. We got new mics, and the stands aren't strong enough to hold them. So.
Oh, there you go.
But anyway.
The mic's good, but you're right.
Yeah, the stand's not. The problem was I didn't have fighters to fuel the fights because at the time MMA wasn't like it is now.
Right.
Anyway, so I started doing stuff to fill the card to try to keep people coming as a promoter. And so one of the shows here in Covington, I did. I had I think it was during the halftime, part-time, whatever the break we had, the intermission. We had Bill Dundee, and he was going to wrestle Flying Brian Collins, who's from Covington, and he's been He was back in the day, I think, a heel sometimes with you guys. But anyway, I didn't know any of you guys. I didn't know people in the wrestling community. Got to know Bill briefly. And had communications with him. So he shows up he shows up to the thing and set up the match. And there was some funny stuff beforehand. Like, for instance, I was the referee, the announcer, the promoter, the whole deal, right? And so I would be in the ring, and I kept trying to announce him to come out, and he wouldn't come out.
Who, Bill?
Yeah. But I hadn't been back to see him yet.
Okay.
And so he thought I was stiffing him on the money. Oh. So I go back.
He wanted to be paid before he wrestled?
He did. So I did. I went back there, and he had several women with him, and I paid him. And so anyway, they come out, and this was like a highlight. Before meeting you, this was like a highlight to me, right? So I'm in the ring as the referee because there was nobody else to be the referee, and it was Flying by Brian Collins and Bill Dundee. So they're wrestling, and Collins got knocked out of the ring somehow. And an opposing coach of another team that kind of didn't like me threw a chair into the ring just as a joke, like, oh, it's wrestling, threw a chair in.
Yeah.
So Bill picks the chair up. Well, I do a jump kick and knock it out of his hands. And he looks at me, and I see his eyes because then he knows that I know how to do something.
Yeah.
And then he goes, do it again. So he picks it up and comes at me again, and I hit it again. And then everybody reacts as they knew me around here, so it was kind of a big deal. And he started then playing on the ref instead of me. But it was really interesting because I had never considered how that's done right then, how he works through all of it at the time. And it was great. Like, I enjoyed it. Everybody loved it. It was a great experience.
Yeah, well, wrestling has really changed over the years. Back in that time, back in the day, up until probably the 90s or 2000 or whatever, it was just like you go in the ring. You didn't even have to see your opponent. You didn't even have to know who it was. You could just go in and you're flying by the seat of your pants. You're ad-libbing everything. And what Bill was doing then, I'm sure, like you just said, when you did that kick and knocked that chair out of his hand, it got a reaction from the crowd. Mm-hmm. And Bill just probably thought, well, there's the first reaction. Let's do that again. Mm-hmm. So and that's the way wrestling used to be. It was all predicated on crowd reaction. Mm-hmm. I mean, you could tell. I mean, if you did something that they liked, they would respond, they would cheer, they would boo or whatever. So that's the way it's changed over the years. Now, guys go out and it's almost like a choreographed match that they're gonna go through it and get in every move that they've got in their mind, whether the crowd is responding or not. Mm-hmm. And it just didn't used to be that way.
Well, even back then, though, there were some wrestlers, and you obviously correct me if I'm wrong, that were kind of dangerous to wrestle, right? Like, who in your experience was somebody that was like, oh, man, I don't know about wrestling this fella?
Well, I honestly, and I've wrestled everybody over my career. I go all the way back, and it would be, you'd have to be my age to even remember these names, but I had a tag team match, me and Jim White, against Lou Thez and Pat O'Connor, and the special referee was Jersey Joe Walcott, mm-hmm. who was a world heavyweight champion boxer back in the Joe Louis days. So I've wrestled just about everybody, and there's never really been anybody that you were afraid to wrestle. You might go in with with the mindset of this guy is like wrestling this table. Mm-hmm. You know, there are some guys that are so smooth, and it's just like it's, I don't know, like a piece of cake working. It's almost like a nice dance or something when you work with some of these guys. But then there were always some guys, Stan Hansen. Oh my gosh, you know, when he would chop you, or when he would hit you with an elbow or something, it just almost like knock your head off. Mm-hmm. Brody. Oh gosh, I'm trying to think of some of the different guys that just had
who
that
was
reputation.
and I didn't mean you're afraid of them. What I meant was more that, you know, oh man, this is, well, and I say, like, I'm a martial artist, right? So we spar people, and I've done jiu-jitsu, grapple, and there are sometimes people that it's just like, man, I gotta roll with this guy because they're kind of spastic, and they don't like you say, they don't flow well with you.
Yeah.
But who was like your favorite to win? It might have been Dundee. It sounds like.
Well, Bill was really good to work with. He and I had such good chemistry. But there were so many. Nick Bockwinkel, I don't know if you remember that name, but he was the AWA world champion. I had great chemistry and had great matches with Nick. Of course, Bill Dundee, Handsome Jimmy Valiant, Austin Idol.
Somebody said the Moondogs. I just saw a comment.
The Moondogs, yeah, absolutely. The Moondogs were they were a great tag team to work with. I mean, the great thing about the Moondogs was the wilder or the more insane it could get, the better it was, because that's what the people expected out of them.
Yeah.
You know, they weren't wrestlers; they were just brawlers. They were just two crazy guys, you know, going in, chewing on a bone, barking like dogs, and that thing. So, yeah, I'll never forget. We had probably one of my most famous matches in the history of our territory was me and Bill Dundee against, at the time they were called the Blonde Bombers. Mm-hmm. And it was my cousin Wayne Ferris, who went on to become the Honky Tonk Man. Okay. And the other one was Larry Latham, who went on to become the premier Moondog Spot, who he had, I don't know, like 8 or 9 different other Moondog partners, but he was the main one throughout all the years. But we had the Tupelo concession stand battle between the 4 of us. And I think that's where Larry got the idea of, you know, having a crazy match with the Moondogs where everything, I mean, we fought in the ring, we had the finish, and then we came back towards the dressing room area and spilled over into the concession stand. Mm-hmm. And just completely tore the concession stand up. I mean, you know, there was mustard and ketchup and condiments and everything flying everywhere. And I'll never forget the promoter, his name was Herman Sheffield. And he said, just please, guys, see that right over there? He said, please don't break my popcorn machine. He said, that's my life right there. Please don't break that, because it's the old glass popcorn machine. Yeah. And so, you know, here's 4 guys going in there just throwing everything, hitting each other with brooms and mops and throwing ketchup and mustard. But we took care of the popcorn machine, so it was okay. So the Moondogs were great. Oh gosh, I mean, there were so many good ones. Terry Funk was one of my all-time favorite opponents, even though he was wild and crazy too. But he just I mean, I was a huge fan of Terry Funk's. You know, just I love to listen to him talk bad about me. I mean, he did some great promos, and I'd just be in the back going, "Oh my gosh, that's so good."
Well, you were known for that too. You were able to mix humor in with the smack talking. It was always good.
Yeah, I always tried to throw a little humor in there. And there's Jackie Fargo, my mentor, used to say, "Funny don't mean money." Yeah. I mean, he would just have these little things. I mean, like if I did something, you know, in a match, and he'd come to me afterwards and said, "Funny don't mean money."
Well, you're talking about wild and crazy stuff. Of course, the Andy Kaufman thing obviously stands out along the way. And I'd heard or read that the David Letterman thing, I mean, it was real, a lot of it. Like a lot of it, I don't know if you knew exactly what the deal was or.
Well, we had an outline of what Dave and his crew wanted us to do. But it went completely off the tracks, and I've said this a bunch of times, and a lot of people don't believe it, but Andy never knew he was going to get slapped. Dave certainly never knew Andy was going to get slapped, and I didn't know Andy was going to get slapped until I slapped him.
Well, again, I know martial arts, and it was a good slap.
Oh, yeah. I knocked him right out of the chair. I slapped the taste out of his mouth.
It was very real. Yeah. It was real. What I was surprised by, though, because I watched that again. I've watched it several times, but I watched it again a couple of weeks ago after we met, and his security lets this all go on, like knowing that it's not what they thought, and then it just.
Well, in all honesty, nobody really knew what they thought was going to happen except Dave, me, and Andy, and the segment producer, Robert Morton. I mean, we were the only ones that he had met with. Robert Morton was the segment producer, and he had me come into the and they were, they had bought into everything that was going on, hook, line, and sinker, because Andy had convinced them that he and I hated each other, and he couldn't even be near me, except he said, I'll go on set with him, but I don't want to. Like when we were supposed to meet at 10:30 in the morning for the production meeting, where the segment producer would get with us and say, hey, here's what we're going to do in these two segments. Well, when I got there for that, he came and he said, I apologize, but Andy just refused to be in the same room with you. But I've already gone over it with Andy, and here's what we're going to do. You guys are going to be on 2 segments. He said the first segment, Dave will show Andy making fun of wrestling from your clips on Channel 5. Then he'll show the clip of you pile driving Andy, and then you guys go back and forth, and then Dave will take a break. He said, I want you guys to be a little antagonistic, not too much, but a little bit. And then Dave will take a break, and then after the commercial break, the second segment, Andy will apologize to you for making fun of wrestling. You apologize to Andy for hurting his neck. And then Andy's going to get up and sing, What the World Needs Now is Love, Sweet Love.
Well, that's not what happened.
No, that's not what happened. And the reason it didn't happen was because Andy and I were still having wrestling matches against each other down in Memphis and drawing big crowds. And we both wanted to continue doing that. And so Andy actually called me in my hotel room after the segment producer, Robert Morton, told us what we were going to do. And he said, well, what do you think? And I said, it'll be funny. Sounds funny. I said, but you've got to know that once you and I kiss and make up on network TV, I said, that's going to be the end of you and I wrestling against each other down in Memphis.
Yeah.
And it was a long pause, and he said, man, you're right. And I'll never forget how he said it, because this wasn't Memphis lingo or whatever. He said, wonder what would happen if you just hauled off and slugged me. And I laughed. I said, oh, Andy, we can't do that. I said, first of all, they won't show it. They're taping this thing at 5:30 and not going to show it back to 11:30. They won't show me hitting somebody on network TV.
Yeah.
And I said, second of all, I'll get arrested. And I said, I got to be back in Memphis tomorrow. I can't be in jail in New York.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, you're right. But wouldn't that be great? And I said, yeah, but can't do that. And that was the way it was left. I didn't see Andy again until we sat down together on the set.
Huh.
And so when we got into that second segment, that first segment went just like they wanted it to, and then we got into that second segment. He never really apologized to me, and then I never really apologized to him, and it kept going on, and I think finally Dave, time-wise, realized, well, this has gone off the tracks, so I'm going to have to take another break and wrap this thing up, right? So he said, let's take another break, see if we can get this cleared up. And Paul Schaefer started playing the music for them to go to commercial break, and I just said to him, it was like an out-of-body experience. I don't even know what I was thinking, but I knew that was it. We're going to be gone after this. And somehow what Andy had said came into my mind, and I just stood up, looked him in the eyes, and hauled off and popped him, knocked him clear out of the chair. And poor Dave, he about went into shock. This was happening right here, and he just, his eyes, he had like some papers in front of him.
Yeah.
I mean, he couldn't even look over there. He was just like, just staring straight ahead, and so then the security came in. They went to break, and the security took me back into the green room, and I sat back there when they go to commercial break, it literally lasts 2 minutes, and then they turn the lights back up, and they start the show right up again. But I sat back there for like 15 minutes, and I could hear just commotion. I mean, it was like somebody had been assassinated. People were actually screaming out there. I could hear women and someone going, oh my gosh, what in the world?
And so, Memphis, they were cheering.
Yeah. And so anyway, like 15 minutes go by, and all of a sudden, and I'm the only person in the green room, And all of a sudden, the door kind of creaks open a little bit, and this little young intern kind of sticks his head and said, Mr. Lawler? I said, yeah. He said, Dave wants to know if you want to come back out and sort of wrap this thing up. I said, sure, be glad to. Now I'm thinking all of a sudden, I said, they must be going to show this, right? Or if they're not going to have me back out, if they weren't going to show what happened. So I go back out, and all of a sudden it was like this. There were 750 people in the studio audience, and it was like it turned into a wrestling crowd. When I walked through the curtain again, they all started booing, boo, boo. I said, okay. So I sit down, and Dave is right there, and he says, Andy? Because they're going like 10, 9, 8. He said, Andy, are you going to come back in here? And I'll never forget, it was like 3, and Andy says, no, if I come in there, I'll say words you can't say on TV. So boom, we came back on, and Dave says, well, I'm here, Jerry Lawler's here, and Andy's sort of here, and all of a sudden, here comes Andy, and over Dave's shoulder, and he lets loose. If you want to see this, the unedited version, you go to YouTube and just punch in Lawler, Kaufman, Letterman, unedited. But he lets loose with this stream of obscenities.
It was impressive.
Oh my gosh, it was crazy. And I mean, like I said, this is network TV.
Yeah.
750 people in the audience. David Letterman, me, and he's on there with this dropping the F-bomb. I mean, everything. And I just looked him in the face, and I'm thinking, what in the hell are you doing, Andy? You can't. It's a miracle they're going to show the slap, but this they cannot show.
Yeah.
So why are you doing it? So with my body language, I just kind of leaned back. I crossed my legs and just to show my disgust with what he was doing, right?
Yeah.
And he just keeps on, and then he reaches over. And the funny thing, you go back and watch it. He reaches and he grabs Dave's. Everybody said it was coffee, but anyway, it was actually water. He grabs Dave's cup of water. And he holds it up like showing me, hey, I'm going to get ready because I'm going to throw this, right?
Yeah.
And then he throws it, and I move out of the way, and he runs off again. And then that was the end of that segment. So the security guy grabs me after that, and he didn't take me to the green room. He takes me to the elevator. And he said, Mr. Lawler, I want to get you out of here. He said, he'll never forget, he said, because that Kaufman's elevator don't go all the way to the top. He'll have you arrested. So I'm going to get you out of here and back to your hotel. So we go downstairs, and this is Rockefeller Center. We go downstairs, and I head out, and I didn't hear a word from anybody until the show came on at 11:30, and turned it on, and they showed everything, even all the the funny thing, they didn't beep out the cursing. They put in, instead of a beep, they put it, that made it even funnier. You could, of course, read Landy's lips and tell exactly what he was saying. But over the cursing, they put the sound of like a cuckoo clock. So and it goes cuckoo, 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 and it made it hilarious.
Yeah.
And I mean, and everything blew up. It's like today you would say, oh, it went viral. I mean, back in those days, this was in 1983, things weren't viral yet, but I mean, it was the talk of not just the wrestling world, but it was a talk. David Letterman told me later on when we did the movie version with Jim Carrey. Dave told me, he said, for years we referred to that as the famous show, and I said, why is that? He said, because that show made us famous. He said he said that was our first year of Late Night with Letterman, and he said I'd already had 4 other shows that were flops. Yeah, and he said that show made us famous.
Huh? And I didn't realize that about the Late Night show with him.
Yeah.
Huh. So you've met lots of folks. I mean, obviously Andy Kaufman, Jim Carrey. Is there anybody that stands out in the course of your career that, and and fame is, and I'm
slam this thing.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I give you the crappy mic. The fame is relative because I've met a lot of different people, and some people are like, oh, but there's certain people that personally, I don't get starstruck very easy. But you're on my list, okay? You, Dana White. I'd love to meet Dana White. So is there anybody
got to meet Dana White
that you were kind of starstruck with?
Oh yeah, I'm a big fan of a lot of people. I've been starstruck by. I'm kind of starstruck by just about anybody that's been on TV or movies or whatever, and I've got to meet so many of them.
Did you meet Elvis?
I did not meet Elvis.
Really?
But believe it or not, right about 2 months before Elvis passed away, I spoke to his father, Vernon Presley, and he spoke to Elvis. Then Vernon called me back up, and we had it planning. And I'll never forget his words. Vernon said, "Jerry," he said, "I'll be honest with you, Elvis is not in great shape right now, but we got this tour coming up in 2 months, and he's fixing to start working out. And when the tour's over, he loves the idea. We'll get back in touch with you, and we'll do this thing." We were going to have at the Mid-South Coliseum wrestling versus Elvis, King Jerry Lawler versus King of Rock and Roll, and he was going to do the martial arts against the wrestling.
Huh. Yeah. That would have been amazing.
Oh, yeah. It would have been something.
Well, I told you last time we talked that I trained with Kang Ree, who was his instructor here. Yeah. And what I understand, of course, he passed away before I was born. But what I heard was he was actually really good. He's pretty decent at karate and stuff. Did you ever do any martial arts? I mean, other than the wrestling?
Not really. I was good friends with, I got to meet Superfoot.
Bill Wallace.
Bill Wallace.
I told you that's another one I'd be starstruck by.
Yeah, got to meet him. He was a cool guy. And then, I think we talked about this a little bit. And I forget people's names. I had him on my TV show on Sunday mornings a lot of times. He was from Memphis.
Mm-hmm. A karate guy?
Amp Elmore.
Yeah, Anthony Amp Elmore.
Yeah. But he came and he did a bunch of different martial arts stuff on my TV show, but I never really got into doing any of that myself.
Yeah. But, well, you had such a good personality. I mean, what of your qualities? Because I mean, another question I was going to ask you real quick before we get into that, the King thing. So that developed from the match with Jackie Fargo, right? Fargo. It was the King of Wrestling or something like that.
Well, I had just made an offhand remark on a promo on the Saturday morning. He and I were going to wrestle that Monday night, and I just off the top of my head, I looked in the camera and I said, Fargo, you've been the king of wrestling, the king of Memphis for a long time, but you're looking at the kid that's going to knock you off your throne Monday night. That was it. That was my interview, and I walked off. And anyway, then we had the match Monday night, and I won. And as I'm leaving the ring, a bunch of young kids are saying, everybody hated me except there were a lot of young people that, like I did when I was a teenager. I liked the bad guys, and there were some people that liked the bad guys, and they were saying, "You're the king now. Yes, the king. You beat Jackie Fargo." And so that just kind of stuck in my mind, and some of these crazy things happened throughout my career that were just like coincidental. I wrestled Jackie on Monday night. That Friday, I was wrestling in Atlanta, and they were just sending me down to make some shots in Atlanta to try to get some exposure. That was a whole different territory. Mm-hmm. And I could fly down, and they had a midnight flight out of Atlanta back to Memphis at the time. And so I could make that flight, and I would get back to Memphis at about midnight, and then make TV the next morning there in Memphis. So that Friday, after beating Jackie and saying, that I was the king of Memphis now, I go down to Atlanta, and I'm sitting in the dressing room, and all of a sudden in walks this guy named Bobby Shane. I'd never even met him, and I was going to be partners with him that night. And in he walks, and under his left arm, he's got this big red crown, golden red crown, and on his right arm, he's got this big king's robe hanging over his arm, and he's wrestling as King Bobby Shane.
Huh.
And I just saw that, and I'll never forget. I just looked at it and said, "Oh my gosh!" I mean, it's like the light bulb went off over my head. I said, "Man, where did you get the crown and the robe?" I said, and I told him the story. I said, "I just wrestled Jackie Fargo last week." I said, "If I could show up on TV, with a crown and robe on, it would be a classic, right?" Yeah. And he said, "Well, you know what?" He said, "I'm wrestling for the promoter there in Atlanta was Jim Barnett, and he also was promoting wrestling in Australia at the time." And he said, "I'm leaving tomorrow, on Saturday morning. I'm leaving tomorrow to go to Australia for Jim Barnett, and I'm going to be down there for 2 weeks." He said, he wrote down the place. I'll never forget, Southern Importers, Houston, Texas. He said, "This is where you call, and they'll send you a catalog or you look it up, and this is where you order the crowns." He said, "But I'm leaving to go to Australia. And he said, I don't want to lug this stuff with me. I'm just wrestling as Bobby Shane down there. Mm-hmm. He said, you take this, you show up tomorrow on TV with this crown and robe, and I'll get it back from you when I come back in a month from Australia. I said, ugh. And there it was. I showed up the next morning with the crown, the robe, and all of a sudden I was the king of Memphis.
Meant to be.
And and the thing that makes it real meant to be was Bobby Shane got back about 3 weeks later, and the first week that he was back from Australia, before I hooked up with him, he got killed in a plane crash down in Florida. So I was left with his crown and robe, and I used that for a long time.
Yeah. Well, in the course of doing it, did you like being a heel or a hero? Because you mentioned that you looked up to the heels as a kid.
Yeah. It's much more fun.
Is it?
It's much more fun to be a heel, yeah. I don't know. I mean, did you ever play sports when you were in high school and stuff like that? I know when we played high school football, I much preferred going to another school and beating their team, and beating their home team in front of their fans and everything, more so than winning in front of our fans. And the same way in wrestling.
Yeah. There had to be something though about, man, because the 70s, and I grew up in the 80s. In the 80s and 90s, you were the legit king, man. Like you were. There's got to be something to walk around, and I mean, even now, I mean, you're royalty around here. You know, I told you that a lot of the people watching, we have good viewership too. We'll get to their questions here in a minute, but that's got to be something though, to be the king.
Well, I never really took that very seriously.
Well, I will say that.
Let me say, you mentioned a while ago, who am I a fan of? And I don't know. I have been starstruck a lot of times by meeting certain people, whether they be TV stars, movie stars, musicians or athletes or whatever. Oh my gosh, one of the biggest thrills ever. As a kid, when I was 7 years old, we moved to Ohio, right near the shores of Lake Erie, and the Cleveland Browns were the biggest thing ever up there, and I became a lifelong Cleveland sports fan. And so anyway, since I got into wrestling, I've got to go back, and I mean, I've got like carte blanche if I go to, I got pictures on here of me and Baker Mayfield, but I got to meet Jim Brown, who was, probably the best football player ever in history. Meeting Kiss, that was one of my all-time favorite shows that I've ever, still to this day, the best show that I've ever been to of any kind of show. And I've been to 20 WrestleManias, but the best show that I've ever seen is Kiss. And I've been like 5 times to see those guys. And then to finally get to meet those guys, Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, and have Paul Stanley at one show come and ask to have his picture made with me, him and his kid. I mean, it's like there's stuff like that that's happened to where, I don't know, I've never looked at myself as being a star, so to speak. I realize that I'm a celebrity because I am seen on TV a lot, but I never really took that seriously. I never, I don't know. But I'm a big fan of other stars. I mean, I've got to meet so many people. Can you imagine getting inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame by William Shatner, who as a kid you're watching him, Captain Kirk on Star Trek? And all of a sudden he's standing there talking about inducting me into the WWE Hall of Fame.
Well, I will say this for your reputation. I've always heard you were a nice guy. I've seen you. I saw you once in Memphis and didn't approach you because I don't want to. One, it's weird to have a grown man be a fanboy guy, but you leave people alone when they're doing their thing. But now that I've gotten to interact with you a couple of times, you seem to be a good person, and it hadn't gone to your head. There was a young guy I had on the show back right after the Comic-Con. We flew him in from Florida. His name's Tyler Huth. Is it Huth or Huth, Josh?
Huth.
He's 18, but his attitude is the same, and he's super successful. I won't say how much he's worth. You can Google it. But it's multiple zeros, millions of dollars this kid is worth already.
What does he do?
So yeah, exactly. He has a video marketing company, but he's also got a huge TikTok following, social media. But his money's actually from the marketing. But it's super down to earth. And at 18, that was impressive to me. But it's impressive to me too when it's someone like you who I've looked up to. I mean, literally as a kid, literally my underwear Saturday morning watching you wrestle. So it's nice to meet you and see that you're genuinely a good person.
Well, I'm still because when I was a kid, I was like you. I was Saturday morning in my underwear watching Jackie Fargo and those guys on TV too, and I was shocked and amazed the first time I ever stepped in a wrestling ring, and I still am every time I go into a ring or every time I see in front of fans, I just think, what in the world? What am I doing here?
Yeah.
I'll never forget. That was another thing. Talk about stars. When I did the movie about Andy Kaufman, I mean, at that time, this was in like 1999. Jim Carrey was the biggest star in Hollywood. I mean, he was making the most money for the movies. Every one of his movies was a big hit, and Danny DeVito was in the movie as well. And I go out to Hollywood, and the very first day, we're going to shoot this scene, and I'd never met any of these guys. And all of a sudden, they bring me into this. They had rented this building. They had this big sound studio deal, and they had an office set up. And so, I know what the scene is. But anyway, I come in and I sit down at a table just like this. And all of a sudden, in walks Danny DeVito, and he sits down at that table just about exactly where you are. Mm-hmm. And then I look up, and here comes Jim Carrey, and he sits down in a chair right next to me, and his leg is touching my leg. And I swear, I just was like, I looked over at him, and I thought, oh my God, I'm sitting next to Jim Carrey and Danny DeVito, and I'm fixing to do a freaking scene with these guys in a movie.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess I've just always been amazed by that. Mm-hmm. That just this kid out of Memphis all of a sudden gets to do the craziest things that you could ever imagine,
Yeah. Well, Covington is technically Tipton County, but we claim you. And like I told you, there's been buzz in this little area about the fact that you were just coming here. It's 40, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever it is for you, but it's still the fact that you take time to come to the smaller communities like this. It means a lot to people. And so I know that everybody in Covington's glad that you'd be around here.
When I first started wrestling and actually going out on trips on my own, a lot of people didn't realize. I mean, you'd get up in the morning and you'd watch Channel 5 wrestling. Back in the day, it was Channel 13 when I first started. You get up and you watch Channel 13 wrestling at 11 o'clock, and then it was on for an hour and a half. Then all of a sudden there would be wrestling Monday night at that time Ellis Auditorium or the Mid-South Coliseum. And what they didn't realize though was that was just the start of the day was Saturday morning. You would go and you'd do TV, and then all the wrestlers would jump in their cars, and they'd either drive to Nashville and do a wrestling show that night in Nashville, or either they'd go over to Jonesboro, Arkansas, and do a show there, or go to a small town and do what we call a spot show, where they would just go to these towns like, once every 6 months or something like that, and just do a little show. But then the wrestlers would go, and they would wrestle every night of the week. I mean, 7 nights a week. Sometimes, and sometimes on Saturdays, you would do 3 or 4 shows. I'll never forget when I first started, me and Tommy Gilbert would travel together, and there were a bunch of live TV shows. There was a 9 o'clock in the morning show in Jackson, Tennessee on a little station, WBBJ in Jackson. And me and Tommy Gilbert would get up and we'd drive up to Jackson. We'd have to get there at like 8 o'clock. Show would go on at 9. You go in, you wrestle. Each one of us would wrestle somebody. And then you jump in your car and drive up to Nashville. And they had a show that came on at 12 noon. And so a live TV show, 12 noon. You get out, you jump in, go in, wrestle there, jump back in your car, drive down to Chattanooga. And they had a show on that started at 6 o'clock in the evening. You jump in the ring there, have a match, get back in your car, and then drive down to Birmingham, Alabama. Man. And they had a show that started at 10 o'clock at night. And me and Tommy and a bunch of the wrestlers, you would make 4 shows in one day in 3 different states, know, and or two different states. And at that time, you'd get paid $15 for each one of those shows.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it was 15. oh my gosh, look, I made over $50 in one day. I was tickled to death. But,
Plus, it ended up being worth it for some folks. So
yeah, it did. But anyway, the guys would travel to all of these different places. And speaking of Covington, when I first started, I had a 62 Ford Falcon that I had paid $250 for, and had notes, had $29 a month car notes on a $250 car.
Yeah.
And so I'll never forget, Jackie Fargo told me, he said, "Kid, you're going to have a better car than that. That car won't make the trips. It won't make these long trips." And I said, this is a great car, my little Ford Falcon. So anyway, I'm making a trip, and on the way home, all of a sudden the motor's starting off. So anyway, I wound up throwing a rod, and I was on the side of the road, had to get towed into Memphis. I called Jackie the next day, and I said, "Well, Jackie, you were right. My Falcon wouldn't make those long trips." He said, where were you last night, kid?" I said, "Covington." So that was it. That was my long trip at that time.
That was your long stay in Covington.
Yeah, and that was a long trip to me at the time, just breaking into business. And the Falcon didn't make it, so I had to get a better car. But yeah, I mean, we would have still have rats. We still have matches
there's still been matches here. Yeah, and so I mentioned to you last time we had the Covington Comic-Con. Mm-hmm. And that's something that me, Josh, and Tara Thompson's another local business owner put on. We're the promoters for it. And this one we did was for charity, and it was real successful. We had about 1,200 people show up, a lot of them from out of town that wouldn't have known Covington.
Yeah, that's great.
And tons of vendors. Everybody's really happy. We even bought all the vendors lunch. Like, we try to take care of everybody. Yeah. And so we're going to have it next year, and I want to go ahead.
Am I getting dinner after this?
You get. I will feed you. No, seriously, I will feed you. It's funny you say that, though. So look, I mentioned this to you before too.
Boy.
I've got a weekly poker game that's area guys get together and play poker. And there's
no betting involved, I'm sure.
Well, there may be a couple of DAs there, but anyway, anyway, we were talking about how I was like, man, I have this dream. I had a guy on several months back who's an Elvis impersonator. He's a local guy that walks around like Elvis. Yeah. He legit always is in character as Elvis. Really interesting fella. And I was like, what if we got Jerry the King Lawler, the Elvis impersonator guy, and there's this other guy, a local guy, that dresses like a cowboy, but he's a card dealer, and I'm like, and the dealer to do a poker game. So anyway, there's an open invitation for that if you ever come. But I want you to come to the Comic-Con next year. We would love to have you back to Covington for anything that you do. Anytime people.
That reminds me, we talk about stars. I had one of my all-time favorites, Muhammad Ali, on my show one Saturday morning. And he left me with a great insult when he was so great on there. And he said, "Jerry, I love your show and I like your style, but your pay is so cheap, I won't be back for a while."
Well,
that's great.
We have to make sure that that's not the reason you're not back. Okay. So, Josh, before I let him go, I hadn't got a chance. I've been mesmerized. I haven't read really any of the questions. Is there anything?
And we haven't plugged what's coming up September the 18th.
Well, I mentioned it. We've even got the graphic pulled up, Josh. Throw that up. September 18th. It's Jerry Lawler's wrestling reunion at the Fitz. And I got a special thing for you guys, too, from around here. If you watch this and you go, if you provide us with proof of ticket purchase that you're going to the event, because I'm going to go to the event, we're going to give you some Kickin Lawyer swag. Oh. So all you got to do is show proof that you purchased a ticket, come into the law firm here in Covington or Somerville, and I'll get my staff to just give you some Kickin Lawyer stuff. So that's just extra incentive. Yeah. So tell us about that, though.
Well, this is going to be, as we said, September the 18th, a Saturday, and it's going to be almost like an all-day event. From noon until it's going to be at the Fitzgerald's Casino and in their event center, which is a big. I mean, they have martial arts.
Yeah, I've been to fights there.
They have boxing, and it's going to be set up for wrestling. But before that, starting at 12, and it's all ages. Just because it's at a casino, it's going to be family friendly. Starting at noon on Saturday, we're going to have a huge meet and greet. We're going to. I mean. I don't know if you have the graphics showing, but we got some of the biggest stars ever in the history of wrestling. We got Arn Anderson is going to be there. We got Jimmy Hart is going to be there. We have Kurt Angle is going to be there. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat is going to be there. Lex Luger is going to be there. Sergeant Slaughter is going to be there. Bill Dundee that you mentioned. Tommy Rich. AEW star Thunder Rosa is going to be there. Miranda Gordy's going to be there. It's just going to be a huge show. And plus some other surprises. Demolition is going to be there. All of these great names. And you get to come in and get this. The admission is only $20. And you get to come in and meet all of these superstars. Get your pictures made with them, autographs, whatever you want to do. But you get to come in and meet all of those people. That's going to be from 12 until 5. And then starting at 7 o'clock, live wrestling show. We got all kind of people that are going to be on that. And the main event of that, I'm going to be wrestling Big Papa Pump, Scott Steiner.
Well, that's worth the price of admission.
And that guy actually goes on one of the lists that we were talking about earlier, the guys that you don't really enjoy wrestling. But yeah, he's on that list. But yeah, that's gonna be a big night of action. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. All those names I know and remember, and I mean, like you said, you got a good it's generational there too. There's some older wrestlers and newer wrestlers, so it'll be a lot of fun. And like I told you guys, I'm going to be there myself. All you got to do is purchase a ticket, and we'll get you some swag. Heck, I might even buy tickets with you, and we can all sit together and cheer.
There you go.
We'll be biased on our side. I can wear my crowns that I got.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that.
Are there any questions there, Josh?
Yeah, we got a couple here. We got Jamie Castleman asked, is there anyone that you ever just refused to wrestle? That means whether they were too dangerous or you just didn't get along with them.
Never did I ever refuse to wrestle anybody. There were some people honestly, I probably shouldn't say this, but there were some people that I just really didn't want to wrestle, mainly because of their hygiene habits.
That's what I thought you were fixing to say.
Oh my gosh, I'll never forget the poor guys. They were the nicest guys in the world, but they were Billy and Benny, the McGuire twins. Uh-huh. And between the two of them, they weighed 1,200 pounds. Yeah. They were enormous, over 600 pounds apiece. And
it's like two Andre the Giants.
Yeah, and they would travel around. And, of course, once they would have a show like every night. And these weren't two guys that you could just go in and, hey, go into a laundromat and throw your tights in there and wait for them to get washed. So these guys would make the whole loop around your territory wearing the same tights every night, and I'd have to wrestle them every night. And their finish was, they would either do a big splash or they would just kind of sit on you. And that was just not fun. There were a couple of guys that did not smell well. Uh-huh. Exotic Adrian Street, but he was from Europe, and he was, some of that's just at that time they would just say, hey, they don't bathe a lot over there, yeah. And so those are, but as far as like being afraid to wrestle anybody, no. King Kong Brody was a guy that had a bad reputation of hurting people or just being real rough with people, but I wrestled him several different times. Matter of fact, me and Austin Idol were partners against King Kong Brody and or not King Kong Brody, Bruiser Brody. We were partners against Bruiser Brody and Stan Hansen, two of the meanest, toughest guys, and to put them together against as partners, it was murder. But anyway, we wrestled them in Memphis, and they were like a piece of cake with me. Of course, I was part owner of the company, booked the matches and that sort of stuff. But after the match, I was watching when Idol would be in there. Anyway, after the match, Austin Idol came to me and he said, "King, if you ever book that match again, I'll quit. Not just quit the territory, I'll quit the business. I mean it." So some guys would be, some guys, but I never had that. I never had that problem.
Huh. Any other good ones, Josh?
Yeah, we got Amy Five-Ass. She asked, are the wrestlers generally nice to be around and talk to, and is there a friendship outside the ring?
Yes, pretty much, especially if you're in the business. Yeah, everybody's pretty much nice and easy to talk to and everything. And then a lot of guys are real close friends outside the ring as well. I don't know. I never really had real close friendships with anybody other than Jackie Fargo. I mean, really, Jackie and I, when I first started, I mean, my father passed away in 1969, and I started wrestling in 1970, and he was really like a father to me, and I just really thought the world of Jackie Fargo. But I mean, Bill Dundee and I are friends. Austin Idol and I are friends. Handsome Jimmy Valiant, Jimmy Hart, a real good friend. But I mean, we don't get together and hang out a lot or anything like that.
All right, we got time probably for about one more. Cameron McNeil, who's actually a good friend of mine, he asked, who was the most fun you had with in the ring?
Wow. I would have to try to visualize what they mean by fun. I guess if ever there was somebody that I always really looked forward to wrestling, because I mentioned him earlier, was because I was a fan of everything that he did, even while it was Terry Funk. I mean, you never knew what Terry was going to do next, but it was always entertaining. It was always funny. Terry was the kind of guy that, you would throw him out of the ring, and he'd say, "Come out, fight outside the ring," and you would hit him, and all of a sudden he would fall back into the folding chairs and come up with a chair around his neck and one on his leg, and I mean, he was just. And I mean, I'm wrestling the guy, and I'm having to go. He was entertaining, not only to the fans, but he was entertaining to the guys that were wrestling against him. I love Terry Funk.
I did have one more question I meant to ask you earlier. Which would you prefer? And I probably know the answer. Would you have preferred being a wrestler or the commentator? Which was the more
wrestler
for sure?
Yeah, I've never really even liked doing the commentator.
Really? Well, you were good at it. Well, part of being the wrestler, though, is, and I want to say mouth running. It's the same thing as a lawyer. You got to be able to run your mouth,
Right.
So, but I mean, I think that played into it because I thought you've done well on both ends.
Do you have a lot I was wondering, I was going to ask you this earlier, do you have a lot of other lawyers that watch your podcast? Or
No.
Are your podcasts never about?
No, rarely. So what? Here's the way it worked. I originally started like 2 years ago. I sat in front of my computer the first one's in my house. I just sat in front of my phone, and there was a question that sort of come up, hot topic on the community. And so what I did is like a 2-3 minute video and just sort of explain the legality side of it. And then that morphed into where weekly I called them law talks. But it's where I would just give insight into whatever, whether if you're going to do it's a DUI, how to do this, or if you're getting a divorce, how to do this. And then it all started going really well. We were getting some traction that way, and the whole Kickin Lawyer thing come up and was doing well. So then I decided that a lot of the firms in Memphis, they have a studio where they do their green screen commercials, which we wanted to do something a little different that was informative to the community. But long story short, this has morphed now into sort of a Joe Rogan style podcast. So everybody comes on. We just get to know each other and talk. And occasionally we'll talk about current events or the law. But I have a Monday show that's just me called the Kickin Lawyer Show, and that's usually where I address some legal issues. But I just like talking and meeting interesting people. And I have people, not people even as popular and famous as you, just normal people that are interesting. There's a lot of people in the community, even around here, that sometimes, and I think it's good that we help each other. You help. So I have people come on, they promote their stuff, and we try to help each other out.
Well, when you asked me to be on, I started racking my brain I thought we were going to be talking about legal things.
Stuff, yeah.
And so I thought of the 3 or 4 different legal run-ins that I'd had over the years that were kind of interesting stories.
Well, you're welcome to tell them, but I don't like to get in people's business unless they want to.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Well, anyway, no. I think maybe the first incident that I had involving a lawyer was, and this guy goes.
Sounds like it's going to be a negative experience.
No, it was a great experience.
Good.
It was a little. I met him. I guess he was my car insurance, the lawyer that they hired to represent me. I had a car accident. I had just dropped Jerry Jarrett off at the Memphis airport.
In that Falcon?
No. I'd moved on up to a better car. And so it was pouring down rain. And so I took a different route home, and I'm coming across, I think it was Winchester. And just, like I said, pouring down rain. And I still had a green light. And I'm not even really much paying attention because it was a green light, and I'm really looking more or less about the, the weather conditions. And I'm driving along normal speed, and all of a sudden, this pickup truck, starts making a right-hand turn or left-hand turn right in front of me. And as I said, I mean, I slammed on the brakes. It was pouring down, and my car didn't even slow down. Man, I skidded right into this guy. Bam! Man, I hit him hard. And so, I mean, I still remember because it was so wet and there was no traction. When I hit the side of his truck, it spun, this whole truck started spinning around like that. And my car went over. And so it's, like I said, pouring down rain. I could still open my door. And so I get out and I look over and I see this truck just sitting there, his side all crumpled up. And so I go to look inside and to see if he's okay, right? And I look inside the truck and there's nobody in there. Nobody in the truck at all. And I'm thinking, what the heck? And then I look on the other side and there's no door on the truck.
Oh, no.
Right? So, and pouring rain, and I look around on the other side, and here's this poor old man. The door to his truck is like, I guess it knocked him off and knocked into the door and knocked the door off.
Huh.
And all of a sudden he's sitting in the middle of the road on his door, and he's kind of sitting upright. And I go around and I said, "You're all right. You're okay. Come on, get up." And he goes, "Oh, my back." I said, "Oh, you're okay. Come on, get up." He said, "Oh, no, my back." Anyway, the man's name was Roland Sockenbacher, right? So Roland Sockenbacher claimed that he had the green light and that he was, that
He's in the right of way.
That he had the right of way, and that I came speeding through, and I was going so fast he didn't even see me coming. He says, so he sues me big time, right? And he wanted more than my insurance. There's a cap of my insurance. Mm-hmm. So he wanted to go and have a jury trial. And now Roland Sockenbacher was 72 years old. And his wife sued me as well for loss of consortium or whatever it is. In other words, I guess they weren't able to do anything after this car accident, and he's a 72. So
what year was this? This is pre Blue Pill, I guess?
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I'll never forget, my insurance company offered them the max, and they wouldn't settle. So then I got to go to court. And so I go downtown to meet my lawyer, and he was the coolest little guy. He was a short guy. His name was Ralph Holt. Mm-hmm. And this was in the 70s. But Ralph Holt, he comes in, I go in his office, nice fancy office, looking over the Mississippi River. And we go over what happened on the case and everything. And he said, "Well, all right, looks time to go over there." So he goes, he takes his watch off, which was a nice gold Rolex. Takes that off, takes off this big diamond ring and sets it down on his counter. And he picks up a turquoise ring and puts it on, and picks up an old little Timex watch and puts it on.
Is he going in front of a jury?
Going in front of a jury, right?
Yeah.
And
smart.
That was my first. My first awakening to what was going on here, right?
Yeah.
And so, and then my second awakening was how things worked in the courtroom. This is, like I said, my first experience, right? And here's poor Mr. Roland Sockenbacher, still in a wheelchair, by the way. It's been months, right? So they wheel him in a wheelchair. And so his lawyer has the big board up front with the two streets on it, and then the car and the truck. And he said, "Now, Mr. Sockenbacher, I realize this is going to be hard on you. You suffered a broken back and that sort of thing. But we really need your help here. I need you to come up here and show us just exactly how you were and where he was and that sort of thing." So naturally, here comes the act. Oh, man. Oh. So he gets up, right? And he goes up there, just staggers up there and just shows where the cars were. And then he comes back and he sits down again. So his lawyer talks for about 20 minutes, and then he says, "Man, Mr. Sockenbacher, I hate to do this, but I just need one more time. If you could refresh my memory." Oh, man. Here he goes up, and I'm sitting over there going, "Oh, my gosh." And the jury's looking at this poor guy like, "Oh, poor guy," right? And so, anyway, he sits back down in his chair, and then my little Ralph Holt goes to work. and he didn't really say that much. He got to cross-examine Mr. Sockenbacher, who said, Mr. Lawler must have been coming so fast that I didn't even see him. I just turned, the light was green, I just turned, and all of a sudden he hit me. Mm-hmm. So, okay, thank you, sir. Boom. So then his lawyer gets up and says, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, and you have to listen closely to this. He said, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he was a young guy. He said, my parents sent me to the finest law school available in my state. And they taught me everything. I mean, just everything that you could think of about the law at this school. He said, but the one thing that they couldn't teach me is what is a pain-free day worth. And Mr. Sockenbacher will never experience a pain-free day for the rest of his life. So we're asking for blah, 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 that kind of thing, right? So then my little bulldog, Ralph Holt, gets up, a little bitty guy, right? And he says, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I didn't have parents that could send me to the finest law school in the state. He said, I had to work my way through school. And he said, I don't know if they taught me everything that they could, but they did teach me one thing, that if you fail to see that which is there, then you are guilty of contributory negligence. And Mr. Lawler was obviously there. Mr. Sockenbacher said he didn't see him. But since they collided, Mr. Lawler was obviously there. So all we can say is that if you fail to see that which is there, that's contributory negligence. They went out. The people were gone for about 15 minutes, and they came back in. And Mr. Sockenbacher, who had been offered $100,000, wound up getting zero.
Man, that's good.
Yeah,
I have to look
good.
up that.
Yeah.
We do PI cases like that, and you're right. Those narratives are the exact same thing. And lawyers are really performers too.
Oh, of course.
Like we have to go and sell that argument to the jury. That's interesting. That was your experience. I'll have to look that guy up. I don't know.
Ralph Holt.
Was he older fella then?
Yeah.
I don't know if he's still around.
No, he's definitely gone.
Yeah.
But like I said, it was in the 70s. But that was.
Well, good. Well, I want to be like him then. I don't want to be like the other guys. But I do thank you for your time coming in.
Oh, sure.
If you're around or if it's not that inconvenient, man, you're always welcome to come and hang out here when we do any of this. It's like I said, I hate to keep fanboying on it, but it was a big deal for me just to get to meet you, much less have you here where we could talk about stuff. If I could ask one last favor, I don't know if you noticed, but I got this.
That's my new action figure.
I was going to see
not
if
only
I could.
Have you seen my new Pop?
I
Funko
haven't.
Pop?
I haven't.
Brand new, just came out last
I didn't even know
Saturday.
you had one of those. I'll have to get that.
Yeah.
I was going to ask if you could sign it because I'm thinking
sure.
I might give some viewers a chance to win that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Josh, anything else pop up before we finish up here?
Not really.
We're going to throw that image up again while he's doing that. On September 18th, Jerry Lawler's wrestling reunion is going to be at the Fitz Casino in Tunica. I plan to be there, and like I said earlier, if you missed it, if you'll just buy a ticket and show proof of ticket here, we're going to give you some Kickin' Lawyer swag, and I'll let my staff know about that. And I do thank all of you for watching today. Don't forget to follow, like, subscribe, share, all that kind of good stuff. Let other people know about the King's thank you, about the King stuff. Thank you, sir. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Lawler, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
On behalf of Covington, you're welcome to come back to Covington.
We did have
anytime.
a lot of positive comments. Everybody in Covington seems to love you. So
yeah,
thank you. I appreciate it.
And hopefully you guys will check us out again. Monday we'll be back for the Kickin' Lawyer show, and then Tuesday I'll have another guest on the Law Talk. So thanks for watching, Covington, and whoever else happens to be out there watching. And you guys keep kicking. Thanks for watching, guys. Just remember that this is not legal advice or investment advice or business advice. This is for fun and entertainment purposes only.